Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to part 2 of how to start a tarot journal. In this video, we'll discuss working with your tarot journal, including how to record your readings, add your cards, and fix your mistakes. So let's go through a couple of my journals and take a look at some of the different things that you might want to include in your tarot journal. So the main things you probably want to include in your tarot journal are your actual tarot readings. Now, there's no one way of doing tarot readings, but some of the readings that I like to include in my tarot journal are Wheel of the Year readings and year ahead readings. I think those are really great to kind of start off your tarot journal. If you're using a bound journal like this one, you could just do them in the front, or if you're using the traveler's notebook style, you could do something similar to this, where I had an insert dedicated at the front of my traveler's notebook to my year ahead reading. So some more readings you might like to include are seasonal or Sabbath readings, where you can include your information for that particular event. And of course, we have just daily card pulls. That's always a wonderful thing to put in your particular journal. You can also do readings on particular decks. This is a reading that I did that actually came with my Roots and Wings Oracle. So I made a copy of that and actually did the reading in here. You can also include some weekly reflections. So at the end of the week, once you've pulled all of your cards, you might want to reflect on what it was that you pulled throughout that week. You can, of course, do special event like your birthday readings or new or full moon readings as well. You can also do single card pulls where you just really sink into the message of one particular card. And of course, you can always include any sort of additional messages or notes that you want to keep in mind when you're looking through your tarot journal. So another thing that I like to do with my tarot journals is also include things that are a little bit more along the line of tracking. So I like to try to include the decks that I work with so that I can look back and know which decks I used throughout that particular month. And of course, any tarot spreads that you may do, you can always include in your tarot journal as well. So let's move over to this one, where we're going to take a look at kind of what I did a couple years ago. You can see that I have reflections. You can see that I have a calendar set up. Here was the list of decks that I used. And we had also a Sabbath or a Mabon reading here that I created. A month ahead spread, that's always a great one to include as well, where we kind of to look at the energy. Some of my favorites are basically a 3-card spread with an oracle that is what to release, what to focus on, and what to embrace for the month, and then an oracle message for kind of a wrap up on that. Another fun thing to do in your tarot journal is daily tarot challenges. Now, my favorites are the one from Lionhearts on Instagram, and I will leave his link in the description box below. He does fantastic tarot prompts every month, tarot challenges, where basically you have prompts that you can do your readings on. And you can see for this particular one, I was using Tarot of the Hidden Realms. And it is a great way to really work with your cards on a daily basis. You can do them as either 3-card readings, as I did here, every couple of days, or you can actually do a card a day. So do basically a card a day draw. And it just gives you a prompt and something to focus on. With this particular one, I also did my own sort of wrap-up reading for what I kind of learned and experienced throughout the month of working with this particular tarot challenge. So of course, in addition to tarot readings, you can also include any sort of other divinatory readings. So here I have a Lenormand reading. Here we have a tarot and oracle daily card pulls. So another way to also incorporate those daily tarot challenges is to actually make little separate books that you can do those in as well. This is the one that I did for the Season of the Witch in 2019. So you can see here that I have all of my prompts, and of course this was a little hand-created booklet. So that way I was able to basically take this out and work on it whenever I was working with that particular tarot challenge, and I just tucked it in here at the end of the month when I was done working on it. You'll see that I actually have quite a few of those. Another fun thing to do is just a single card pull where you can just kind of tap into that message. I love doing that as well. So that's kind of the main point of having a tarot journal, right? Is to record our readings so that we have some place to look back at them. I do get asked a lot, do I look back at my tarot journals? Do I work with the readings after, say, a few months or a year or 2 or 3 has passed? And the answer is yes. That is why I keep my tarot journals. That's why I like to flip back through them so that I can take a look at things and see how things have grown and changed. And in particular, when you have a very creative journal like I do, it's just a lot of fun to flip back through and look through all of the things that you created. So some of the other things that you could do with your tarot journal is also kind of use it as a tracker or catalog. So some of the things that you might want to track is the cards that you pulled throughout the year. This was my card tracker from 2019, and you can see that I didn't fill it out at all. So here's an example of great intention, but I never followed through with it. And that's because really I found that as the year evolved, I really wasn't doing single card pulls. So trying to track your cards for the year when you're doing multiple pulls a day becomes really, really tedious. And so I just didn't do that. But this is a great practice if you are looking to just pull a single card for the day. It's really interesting to kind of track your cards throughout the year and to see which cards you pulled more of all throughout the year. So a couple of other trackers that might be fun to have in your tarot journal are books that you want to read, in particular books that maybe relate to your tarot practice. I had created this little booklet for 2020 where I just noted some of the tarot related books that I wanted to read, and I popped them into there. You can have a list of decks that you want to study, decks that you want to work with, and decks that you want to buy. There's really no shortage of things that you can keep track of in your tarot journal. Basically, if it's something that you want to remember, something that you want to record and be able to look back on, feel free to include it in your tarot journal. Your tarot journal doesn't have to have a set structure. It can follow any structure that works for you and include anything that you need it to in order to help you better connect with your tarot practice. So another key journal for me is a deck study journal, and I've done a complete video on how I actually study my tarot decks, but because it does incorporate journaling into it, I just want to touch on that real quickly. So of course, this is my study journal for my Moonchild Tarot. This particular journal does follow my tarot bound process, which again is something I cover in that other video. But basically this journal allows me to just really dive deep into a deck. It allows me to really explore the cards in detail and really look at what the creator intended and what my own personal reflections are. I've got spreads in here that I have done, some different exercises like my path working exercises, some different kind of readings that I've done as well. And so that's a great way to really focus in and connect on one particular deck. And sometimes I end up doing that not as a whole separate journal, but as we see here, incorporated into my daily tarot journal, where here I was actually working with, studying, and getting to know the Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot by following a tarot challenge and just doing it in my daily journal. And I was just basically using that deck every day and recording my readings from it. So it doesn't always have to be a separate journal. It's just something that you might want to consider including into your tarot journal or creating a separate study journal for, is to really dive deep or to get to know individual decks. So one of the things I get asked most often is, how do I get the copies or the printouts of my cards into my journals? So a couple of things that I want to mention before we really jump into the particulars is, the first thing that you need to do this particular process is some way to print the color copy out. So you'll need either like a color printer, or they have these new pocket printers, which are little thermal printers, which I don't currently have, but look fantastic for this kind of thing. So they allow you to print directly from your phone. So I use a color printer, and my personal printer is a Canon TS9120, which is a wireless printer, scanner, and copier all in one. And it works beautiful for this because I can take photos of my larger spreads and use my computer to actually print them out, or I can just throw my cards on top of the flatbed scanner, scan them, and then print them back out. So I either take a picture of them like we see here, where this is one of my self-care spreads, and I basically just took a picture of my spread laid out on my table, put it into my computer. I use Photoshop to do my photo manipulation, but you can also use the free programs that come with your computer. There's also some programs online that you can use as well. And then I just scale it down to the size that I need, and then I print it back out. Now, a couple of notes or little tips that I found when doing this is that I have a Photoshop template that is set to the size of my tarot journal. So whatever tarot journal I'm currently working in. So for the last year, that has been in a B6 size notebook. So I have a template in Photoshop that is B6 size so that I can scale my photos down and I can see actually how big it's going to be on the actual page. Because otherwise, when I just kind of guess, sometimes my photos come out too big, I print them too big and then they don't fit on the page, or sometimes I print them too small and I can't see the detail, and now what's the point of having them in there? So I keep a document that is the right size. You can also do this in Word. Like, you can use any sort of program that'll allow you to import an image. So you can set your document size in, say, like a Word document, and you can make it to the size of your page that you're going to be printing on or putting your printout on. And that way it allows you to make sure that everything that you're putting in here is the size that you want it to be on the page. So like this one, I wanted it to pretty much be as wide as the page is for the most part. So I scaled it down. I wanted to leave a white border, so I was sure to make sure that there was enough room for that. But I wanted it to take up the majority of the page. So for these little ones, I wanted them to be smaller and thumbnail size. And this particular instance, for this process, what I did was actually just took these 3 cards, and this is really my standard process anytime I have a reading of 4 cards or less, because I can fit 4 cards on my scanner. Now, sometimes I do it with larger spreads and I just cut them all out individually, but that's a lot of work. Sometimes I put them on my color scanner and I just make a color copy of them basically. So for this instance, I basically took my 3 cards, laid them on my scanner, and I reduced the size. So on my printer, I can actually set the copy size to be smaller than normal, or larger. I can blow it up or I can make it smaller. So generally, I like to reduce the size to around 50 to 60%. These are probably 50 if I had to guess, because that's close to the size that I almost always do, because that gets me a nice thumbnail size. I can still see what's going on in the imagery, but it's not so large that it takes up the entire page. So I just throw these on my scanner. I literally make a color copy of them, reduced to 50%. Then I take them, I cut them out, and I actually paste them into my journal. Now, the reason that I like to do the scan method if I have just a handful of cards is because it's faster in general. I can just do my reading, I can take my cards, to pop them on the scanner, and then just basically make a quick color copy of them. Otherwise, if it's a larger spread, I have to take a picture with my phone, then I have to either upload that picture to the cloud or connect my phone to my computer so I can get the picture off. Then I have to take it into Photoshop, I have to resize it, and then I have to print it back out again. Now that's great for the readings like this, where I want to include the larger reading, or maybe here where I have, like, I want to include the elements that I had on my table at the time of the reading. So that's a great option for that. But when I just want to do, you know, a couple of cards, just my normal sort of everyday reading or my weekly readings, just popping them onto my color scanner, making a copy and putting them into my journal, that's the quickest, easiest way for me. Sometimes I also do full-size color copies, particularly if I want to focus in on one particular card or I'm just doing a single card reading. So in that case, I just pop the card onto my scanner, make a color copy at 100%, cut it out. I always use my little corner rounder to round the corners. You definitely do not need to go to that level for sure. and then I pop it into my journal. And most of the time I glue it. I used to use Fabri-Tac all the time, especially when I'm doing these more tactile or textile layouts. But a lot of times I just use my Uhu glue, and we'll kind of talk about that here in a minute. So that's primarily how I get all of the pictures of my cards into my tarot journal. They are not the actual cards themselves. They are just color copies basically of the cards or printouts of pictures that I've taken of my reading. Now, the one thing that I think is really important is, besides having a decent printer, which definitely helps, make sure you have decent ink, that definitely helps too. But the thing that people often forget to look at is the paper they're actually using to do the printouts. So regular copy paper does not have the same quality to it that a photo paper has. So when I do my printouts of my cards, for one, I always make sure I have color ink, and two, I use a higher quality paper. So the one that I use actually says it's for color copies. It is a 94-pound paper at 97 brilliance. So it's very bright white, it's a little bit heavier, and I find that it works a lot better than your standard 20-pound copy paper. So the paper that you use actually does have a pretty big impact on the type of imagery that you get. So using a higher quality paper helps you to get fuller colors, it helps you to get a more saturated print, and it holds up a little bit better to, the pasting it in the journal. Another option is, of course, photo paper. Now, I don't use photo paper, although it prints beautiful images. I print far too often to use expensive paper. And photo paper, besides being quite a bit more costly, also tends to have a bit of a sheen to it, which is not great when you're filming or taking pictures of your journal, which is something that I have to keep in mind because I'm sharing my journal publicly. And as I mentioned, it's more expensive than just buying the higher quality color copy paper. The other reason that I don't really care for photo paper is it is quite a bit thicker, so it adds more bulk to your journal, and I would prefer my bulk to be in textiles and decoration than in the actual paper that I'm printing my card on. So those are kind of the two most important things to think about or to look at when you're looking at printing your cards to put in your journal. You want to make sure that you have a way to color print your cards, and you want to keep in mind the paper that you're actually printing on. Now, the pocket printers do have their own sort of paper. I assume those are closer to photo quality, since a lot of those is what that's meant for, is printing off photos from your phone. So I would assume that those would make really great copies for your journal as well. I don't personally have one, but I know several people who do and use them and say they work beautifully for that, because you can just take a picture of your reading or of your card and print it out on your little pocket printer. So for me, I just throw them on my color scanner, make a copy of them, shrink them down if I need to, cut them out, and paste them into my journal. So now that we've talked about how to actually get your images into your notebooks, let's talk a little bit about what to do when you make a mistake in your journal. So there are a couple things that I like to do when I make a mistake in my journal. The first thing is, if I'm making a mistake in just like my writing, my reflections or something like that, just general writing, I tend to use just the whiteout tape, and I just white it out and write over the top of it. Oftentimes you can't even tell by the time you white it out and you get the text written over the top of it. Now, I do have to say that if you're working on a journal like this one, where the pages are ivory, the white correction tape does stand out more than on a white journal. And my journal for 2021 does actually have white paper, so that will be helpful for when I make a mistake. So another thing that you can do when you make just like a little mistake when you're writing is actually use washi tape to cover it up. Let me tell you, washi will cover up a multitude of sins. A lot of times if I have something that I don't like the way I've written it, or maybe I want to cover up a title that I don't like the way I put it on there, I just use a strip of washi tape, and it looks decorative, but a lot of times it's covering up mistakes. Now, if you're using a lighter washi tape, you might find that your text actually shows through. So So just go ahead and white it out first and then lay the washi tape over the top of it, and that will help you to cover up whatever mistake you have made. Another thing that you can do is actually cover up mistakes within the text that you're writing. So here I obviously wrote the wrong word or something, or made some sort of a boo-boo, and I just kept on going as I was writing. Now coming back to fix it, rather than just take my pen and, you know, scratch out the writing, I could have whited it out, which I didn't do because I can see the text coming through. And let's just peel this off because this is washi. So what did I do here? So here is, I started to write upside, and for some reason I didn't write it very well. So what I can do is take my correction tape, go over the top of that, cover that up, and then I used a little piece of washi. In this case, I just grabbed a little sliver of washi that had a butterfly on it, and I just tucked it right into my reading right there. Now, it looks like a butterfly just floating up in the midst of my text. But really what it's doing is covering up a mistake. So washi tape and correction tape will cover up a multitude of sins in your journal. Another technique that you can use to cover up mistakes in your journal is actually paper crafting. So in this particular spread, I did not like the way I originally wrote the date up here. I wrote Friday. I don't remember exactly what it was about it that I didn't like, but I remember enough to know that I didn't like what I did. So I covered the top of it. I just covered over the top of that with some paper, some torn paper. I did add some washi to it just to kind of finish it off and pull this same color that I had here. And I just rewrote the day on a scrap piece of paper and glued it all over the top. So underneath this is the thing that I don't like, is the mistake that I originally made. So I just covered it up with paper. Now there have been times on a spread or on a page where I didn't like anything I did on the page, and so I'll just take a piece of paper, cut it to the size of the page, maybe leave a small border, but cut it to the size of the page, and I will just paste it right over the top of the mistake I made and start over. Now, I do want to note that when you are fixing mistakes, it's one thing to fix a mistake that's like a written word or something like that, or just I didn't like the way I laid it out, so I'm going to start over and relay it out. You want to be aware of those times when you're tempted to rewrite your messages, because there have been times where I've been like, this didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I'm going to start over, or I'm going to cover it up, or maybe I didn't, like the way my writing came out here. This is being super nitpicky, and I do want to note that, like, you really don't need to go to this level of detail when you're working in your tarot journal. Mistakes happen, life happens, and a lot of times I just leave the mistakes because it's a part of my process, right? Every time I make a mistake, I learn and grow. So a lot of times I like to leave the mistakes in here. But it's important to know that if those mistakes really bother you and you really want to cover them up, just make sure that you're not kind of rewriting your original message, because there have been times where I have seen it, maybe didn't like the text that I had here or the way I wrote it or something. So I decided to cut out a piece of paper, cover over the top of this, and rewrite it. Before I cover it up, I try to copy it word for word onto a separate piece of paper that I'm going to cover up, that's cut to size to cover this up, because I don't want to change the initial reading that I had, the initial message. I want to maintain it. I just want to rewrite it so that it looks nicer. And that's something that I like to try to keep in mind whenever I do find that I'm rewriting things into my journal. Now, I don't often rewrite or fix huge chunks of my writing. What I tend to fix are little boo-boos, like where I started to write the word up, and then for whatever reason I was maybe going to change my mind. I don't know what happened here, I don't remember, but fixing something like that, or I didn't like the title that I had originally. Those are all minor fixes that I will do in my journal. I try to avoid rewriting the actual reflections, because to me that's the most important piece, and that's the most authentic piece. Everything else that I do on a page here is really just to support the reading, to add that creative layer to it, and to really help me to kind of explore it in a different way, in a more visual way. But I want to make sure that I'm not changing the initial reading that I receive, because that is really the important part. So when it comes to fixing mistakes, keep in mind that you can white out your little mistakes and just rewrite over them. You can use washi to cover up mistakes. You can use paper to cover up mistakes, but make sure that you're not covering up those really important parts of your reading, even if they don't look really great. The main thing is to really get the information down. However it is that comes out for you, that's what's most important. But I know for some of us, having mistakes in our journal can really detract from our enjoyment of the journal. So that's just a couple of quick ways that you can kind of fix some of those little mistakes as you're working in your journal. So another tip that I have found helpful along my tarot journaling journey is to actually do my readings separate from my tarot journal. So I actually do my reading, I write my reflections, and most of the time that happens on just a scrap piece of paper, because that really allows me to focus on the reading and not all of this creative expression that's going on here. So for me, tarot journaling is kind of a multi-step process. There is the first step, which is the actual reading, which is where I'm taking the time to really sit with the cards, to gain the message, and to really think about the wisdom that I need to be gaining from this reading. Then I go back and I add it to my tarot journal. Now this allows me to creatively explore the reading. So while I'm not changing anything that I've written here, my initial reading stays the same. It's not changing. I'm just using things like paper and stickers and elements and color from the cards that are inspired by the cards or inspired by the reading to help me kind of creatively explore the reading. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about the reading as well. So there are things that are kind of clicking in my mind as I'm working through this. And sometimes I will reflect on those in more journaling. Sometimes I will do it directly on the page as well. And there have been times when I've added little flip outs or fold outs, and those are things we'll take a look at here in a minute, to actually give me space to expand upon them. But it's important to note that I've found that trying to do this right from the get-go, from the moment the cards hit the table, kind of takes me out of the experience of the reading itself. So I like to do the reading first. I like to focus on the reading, focus on the cards, and then this becomes a extension of that reading. It becomes the next step, the next phase of that reading. For me, I don't always do this at the same time I do the reading. Sometimes I write it down. In fact, a lot of times I actually write it down. I will make my color copy of my cards, and then I'll just tuck it into the front of my tarot journal and actually add it in when I have more time to really focus in on the creative aspect of it. The other benefit to this is that it gives me a little bit of time between my initial reading and when I'm putting these into my journal. And so that gives me a little bit of time and a little bit of perspective, because sometimes when you're reading for yourself, having a bit of perspective in the moment can be hard. So putting things into your tarot journal kind of a little bit later on also helps you kind of gain that space and that perspective so that you can go back and kind of look for deeper insights, look for new things that have maybe emerged. And that's something that you can include in your tarot journal, or just note in your own self, or maybe write or journal about in another separate journal. So that is kind of my process for how I get things in my journal, when I do it, how I get my cards in, and all that kind of good stuff. So whether you're starting a new journaling practice or revamping the one you currently have, taking a little time to plan out what you want to include in your tarot journal can save you a lot of frustration and help you to focus on what it is you really want to create. You can discover more about tarot journaling, as well as find prompts and spreads to support your practice in How to Keep a Tarot Journal. This helpful guide is available on my website now at bohotarot.com, and I will leave a link for you in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.